First line of greeting all the walkers will be the registration people, so set the tone. Register all individuals and teams on the location report, which I will show you. And actually, when you set up your registration process, it is probably a good idea to set up individual walkers to register at a certain area, and then right next to it, teams. Because if you set up the teams in a separate area, it actually will help making the team tallies more easily available, and I'll get to that when we talk about how to do team totals. Then this is also the point where you are the participants hand in cash and checks to you, and you reconcile the pledge forms along with the cash and checks. Anyone walking and has not registered online or handed in a signed pledge form must sign the waiver. Now this is interesting because a few locations got everyone to sign a waiver, but that's not the case. If somebody is handing in a pledge form and they've signed it, they've signed the waiver. If somebody has registered online, it means they've signed the waiver, because that's part of the registration process. You can't proceed without agreeing to the waiver. The only people who have to sign the waiver on walk day are those who didn't register online, didn't hand any pledge forms in signed. Those are the people who show up to support their loved one or friend and just walk. But we want to have a tally of people and recognize who has come, so it's important that they sign the waiver, one, for liability, and two, then we can account for everyone who's there, and we got a name at least and their address. So next step is then to ensure that all the walkers' contact information and donor information is complete on their pledge forms. We will be supplying you with data tickets, which I'll show you later, that will help you to reconcile cash checks and credit cards coming in. And then once all the paperwork is done, it's really important to thank those who are attending, because without them, our walks wouldn't be happening. And then as well, you want to recognize the superstar walkers. Those are the ones who raise $1,000 or more. So when they arrive and they check in and you reconcile their monies, there are hats and yearly pins. So a pin that says 2018 to give them so that they can wear while they walk as a recognition for their extra efforts in fundraising. Then also, if somebody's only registering and checking in with you with a pledge form and hasn't registered online, just make sure that on the pledge form that they have completed and checked off the box as to whether or not they want Roots incentives. Now, Roots incentive means that if you've raised $1,000 or more, you have the option to collect a Roots gift card. We pay 70% of the value on there, so we get a 30% discount, and they start at $100. So that is a great incentive price for people who raised a lot of money. However, we do ask if they want to keep it or they don't want to keep it. If they want that, they check off yes, and we'll mail it to them in November. If they don't and they ask you where the money goes, it just goes right back into the SuperWalk fundraised pool and goes to support our research, advocacy, services, support education programs, everything that we fundraise for. Any questions on this? Nope? Okay. Next. There's 4 types of walkers that's going to come through. One is those walkers who only registered online and did all their donations online, so they won't have anything to hand in other than to show up and say, hey, I'm here. So they do have to check in because you want to give them a t-shirt, and also you want to know if they've shown up. How you will know how much they've raised that day is from the location reports, which we will be sending out to all organizers the day before the walk, probably the morning before the walk day, so they have enough time to make photocopies for all their registration people. And I'll call them tellers just to help us know who they are. So each teller will have a location report, which is very, very important, because that's like the registration list that tells you everything, and then you will also use that to find your tallies total raised by walker, by team, and also by walk day. The second type of walker you'll encounter is the ones who just show up with pledge forms, never registered online, so there's no way for us to track how many extra people will show up. On the bottom of your location report, which is your registration report, there'll be empty lines, so you can write down people's first name, last name, and how much monies they're bringing in, again, to help you with your tallies on how much they raise and also how much you've raised that day. Then there's the third version where it's a combination. People have registered online, fundraised online, but will also be showing up with a pledge form with cash and checks. So you will have to still reconcile the pledge form and add the pledge form's totals to their online totals to find a grand total that they have raised for walk day. Then individual with no fundraising, no online donation, no pledge form to hand in, those are the only individuals who need to sign the waiver. So there's two types of waivers we're sending out to you in the organizer boxes. One, which is the regular one-sheet waiver, and I'll show you that later on. And then two, today I just formatted a new one, which is a one-page waiver with the liability details on the top, and then several slots at the bottom just for people to fill out their names, contact information, and sign, because then that way you don't have a lot of papers. So it's on an 11 by 14, 8.5 by 14 sheet. 4 people can sign at once. I would suggest, if you're using that, to maybe put up 4 in a row so 4 people can fill them out at a time. It's always easier to do the full sheet waivers for families, and I'll get into that when we get to the waiver section. So this is your location report. You'll see that we'll be sending those out, and they have several columns so that you can look to see everything. And also, I'm going to use my pointer here. Hang on, where's my pointer? Well, there's my pointer. You'll see that we leave blank columns for people who just show up with their pledge forms because they didn't register online, and therefore we can't print them up in advance. They'll have more than this amount of lines. We'll have several pages of blank lines for you. Just for our purpose, I just showed one page for this presentation. So first name, last name, and all of this will be sorted by alphabetical last name, whether or not they're a team member or what team they're part of, their team name. If they're a team captain, it will show yes. If they're not a team captain but a team member, it'll say no. And if it's blank, it means they're not part of a team, they're an individual walker. Next column, column A, will show how much they've raised online the day before the walk. So if a walker shows up on walk day and says, hey, I looked this morning at my walk total and it's greater than, let's say for Elspeth here, it's greater than $1,000, it's 1,100, take the higher of the two. Because of the timing of our printing of our location reports, it will be out of date by the time you use them in the morning. So always just take the higher of the two. It doesn't matter to try to find out the actual number because the fundraising totals are always fluctuating. We receive donations all the way till the end of the year, so they are always changing. And if there's any changes, I can handle it from my end when everything gets handed in to us at the office post-walk. Next, there's a column here for you to write in the number of cash and checks they have. Then as well, a line to write any credit card information they have handed in to as donations. If you add up A, B, and C, you'll get a grand total for whether for the walker themselves. And if it's over $1,000, you can give them a hat and pin and just check it off here that you've given it to them. And that way they can walk with their hat and pin during the walk. Again, if somebody shows up and they aren't on this list because they didn't register online, write in their first name, last name, whether they're part of a team, whether a team captain. This will be 0 because they never registered online, and then complete across as usual. At the end of the walk, when you want to find out how many people how many people alternately what your walk total is today. You gather up all the location reports from all your tellers and you do the tally. So you say, okay, this is the tally from this sheet, the total for cash and checks, total for all the credit cards, and this is your total for grand total, and this grand total here will be the amount that you raised on walk day. And you can make that announcement, hand that over to the organizer and the MC, and they can announce how much you have raised that day. And then you always include the online amount too, and if any of these numbers changes, just change the total down here. Does that make sense? You can ask me questions as we go along, because then that way it's actually more relevant and I have the slide up to answer questions, so you don't have to save them for the end. Next is the pledge form. So I want to show you what the pledge form looks like. It is a slightly different format than last year. We made a lot of the boxes bigger because we got feedback that there wasn't enough room to write addresses and total amounts, etc. This is the box where I said to be careful to make sure whether or not they want incentive or not. There's a yes or a no. This is the waiver. If somebody signs their pledge form, it means they've signed the waiver. They don't need to sign anything else. Very important to make sure this is all clear so we know who the walker is, what walk location it is. And again, these are the slots for people to fill in all their donations and donor name and contact. And you just add all the totals up to verify that down here the total equals the cash and checks and credit cards that are handed in. Every teller is going to need data tickets. We'll be sending them out in the organizer's boxes for you guys to use. A data ticket helps you reconcile the totals that are being handed in so you can match it up to what's on the pledge form. So first step is to take the data ticket. As soon as somebody shows up with a pledge form, take a data ticket, write their walker's name on it, and staple it to the pledge form so it's together. Then you can make sure, or actually you might want to keep it separate, staple it last, because I realize you're going to fill in information here. Then you take the walker's name, write it there, so in case the data ticket gets separated from the pledge form, we still know who it belongs to. Record the online amount from the location report next to the person's name, which I'll show you the location report. So if they're on here, what I would suggest is if they're already here, every teller should have a highlighter and just highlight that this person has arrived and then complete to the left. If they're not on here, you fill in that and you complete to the left. Next, you make sure that the math on the pledge form is done correctly. Some people just, there's a lot of donations that they're adding up. They make a mistake. Just double check the math on that. And then you count out the cash and checks and credit cards and make sure they equal to what is on the pledge form. If there is any monies handed in, you make sure it works. And then if everything is correct, then you put it in a Ziploc bag and you hand it over to your supervisor. It's important that if there's a discrepancy at that point, if there's money that is short, to ask the walker then and there to see which one, perhaps, you know, one of their donors did not have a chance to pay up their donation, yet it's already written on the form. What you do is find out which one didn't donate, cross it off, make a new total on the pledge form, and then it will match up to the dollars. For that person who did not pay their donation yet, you say, well, you can take a donation form home, and when, let's say it's Aunt Mary gives you the $20 for the donation, fill out the pledge form and mail it in to the Parkinson Society office, and the address is on the pledge form. Credit card chits. This is what a credit card chit will look like. The pledge form does not have enough room to put all the credit card information for anyone who wants to pay a donation by credit card. So you just fill in all of the following and then attach it to the pledge form as well.
Excuse me, Betty, will the
Yeah.
walkers have this credit card form already?
No, it is the registration tellers who will have them, because they'll show up and say, hey, I want to make a donation. I've got a credit card. And then the teller will say, oh, yeah, great, I'll take this out and I'll fill it in.
So you're not expecting that the walkers will have on their already completed forms?
No, because they won't have access to these forms. It's not on the website. So they'll just show up with their credit card, and then you could take it then. It's kind of not great idea anyways to be walking around with paper with all your credit card information. If they lose that sheet of paper, it wouldn't be good. That's why when they're right away taking the credit card at the event, it's great, because then it goes in the Ziploc bag. It goes handed to the supervisor who collects everything, or to the bankers.
Okay, thank you.
So online registration, I just wanted to make a note there. So for those who made donations online only and registered, still fill out a data ticket for them, because they're not handing in anything, but we want to have a note, a record of them showing up. And on the data ticket, just write in on the line that what the online raised was, and it could be 0 for everything else, because they're not handing in any monies. At least that way we still have a record of them showing up. We send out an email the night before the walk to all our walkers with instructions to look on their website or do a printout of their participant page to show how much they've raised, so we have a most current number for them. Some people bring the form in that they print out. Most people do not. So if they do bring in a form, just staple the data ticket to the donation report that they will bring in. And over here is a copy of what a donation report will look like when it gets printed out from our website. So to find out what the amount that they raised is, if they do not bring in their location donation report, you just look on your location report and it will say, and if they say, oh, I got money in overnight, it's now 1,100 versus 1,000, take the higher amount, cross out what's on the location report, put in the new one. If they bring in their donation report, the way to find out what the current amount is that they raised online is here, what I've circled. Confirmed amount raised, go across, and it will say. And always, again, take the higher of the two. And then you follow the same steps. If they have monies to hand in, take the monies, reconcile their monies along with their pledge form. When everything is done, put it in a Ziploc bag and hand it over to your banker or to the supervisor. Again, if there's any kind of discrepancy, try to figure out what is happening or where the money is missing with the walker right there, because it's too difficult for your organizer and for me when it comes to our office to then figure it out at a later date. Now, if there is a discrepancy that you can't figure out, don't hold up the lineup. You can pass them along to your banker or to your supervisor to deal with on the side. If they can't figure it out, because sometimes there's mysteries that just can't be figured out, let them proceed with their walk, and we'll figure it out after the walk, either in my office between a telephone call with the organizer and myself, and we can sort that out. Again, to continue on, complete all the totals on the location report, give them a hat. A blue hat is for anybody who raises $1,000 to $2,499. A red hat is for anybody who raises $2,500 plus. And give them a ticket to get their t-shirt. I usually like to have my t-shirts at a separate table so it doesn't slow up the registration process. That's why I say give a ticket. The thing about the different color hats, sometimes it can be confusing, and in the spur of the moment with everyone waiting and registering, you might give out the wrong color hat. Don't worry about that. I've never, in the 10 years that I've worked here with SuperWalk, I've never had anyone complain that they got the wrong colored hat. And if they do complain and say, hey, I really wanted the red one, and want to exchange, feel free to exchange it. Or if it's after the walk and they realize the error, I can mail them from my office. Next, so Here's just a quick look. I've gone over pretty in detail already what to do, but here's a picture of a pledge form with the data ticket attached. You can put in all the amounts, so you'll see that it is name first, number of pledge forms that are attached, because some people are great with fundraising and have more than one pledge form to hand in because of the amount of donors. There is the online amount that you put on this line. Any cash, you count out the cash, and coins, put that on this line. If there's checks, add them up as well, put them on this line. There's credit cards, and then you add everything up, and that is your total raised for the walker. Now this should match what's on your location report as well. When everything else, when it all balances, then you put it in a Ziploc bag and you hand it to your supervisor, and then it goes to the banking, and then they can do a second check here, and that's their area to work just to do your double checks. And again, I'm just showing you the location report. And again, this is when you have a combination, so make sure to staple the data ticket to the pledge form, and you look up what they raised online. If they have a higher amount, take the higher of the two, and then continue along here, do the add up, and make sure everything reconciles, hand it to your supervisor once everything is completed and in a Ziploc bag. What I wanted to show you just quickly, going back, I realized I forgot to show you. On the donation report that they may bring in, you'll see this bottom part. If they have anything there, that means they have themselves manually imported their offline donations that should be on a pledge form. If they haven't filled out a pledge form and say, hey, just use this and I'll hand you my monies in, you have to let them know that a pledge form does have to be completed, because if you'll notice, we don't have address information here. We just have the amount. To properly process a donation that comes in via a pledge form and to send out tax receipts, we need their complete mailing information as well. So even though they did it here, they still have to fill out a pledge form, and please ask them to.
What if they don't have the address information with them?
If they don't have this, that's fine. You have the location report, which shows you what they raised online. And anything else, if they hand in cash and checks, it has to be on a pledge form anyways. So if they don't have a pledge form, they still have to complete one, even though they had filled it in online. Because I don't have access, the only way to see that information is if you log in as that person, and I don't have access to their information that way due to privacy reasons. I don't have their login information. Does that make sense? So even if they don't show up with any paperwork and they only registered online, use this information and say, oh, thank you, Bob, you registered online, you didn't bring any paperwork, you don't know how much you raised. Well, this is how much you raised, right here. And then you fill it on a data ticket, and that's all you hand to your supervisor. So now this is what the waiver looks like. So this is the liability blurb that they have to read. Then they write in their first name, last names, and they sign. For families, to make it easy, they can, for children, you can write their last name here, and then under first name you can list all the children that are, you know, coming with this one guardian, and the guardian then writes their first name, print, and then signs it for all these children that you've listed here. The other version that I'm giving you is a one-pager where it has this on the top and then 4 of these going way down on a legal size paper, just so that there's less paper to handle. Does that make sense? Then the next is teams. So a person who comes in is first an individual, but then they're also a team member. So you process them the same way, except there's an extra layer to do, an extra step where we will send you blank sheets that look like this. This one is filled in because I used it in Vancouver and I had the time to type them in. But the ones that we send to you, will be blank. So what you'll do is you'll write in your location, the team name, the team captain, and as the team members come in, you can write their names in, write that they've checked in, and how much they've raised. And as they come in, once the walk starts, you can gather up all these team reports and write their grand total, and then you can find out who your top fundraising team is for that day. And at the end of the walk, I usually like to recognize our top individual fundraiser and our top individual team, and I give them a certificate. It's just a printed certificate that we have. I'm putting one of each, top fundraising team and top fundraising individual, in each of your boxes for the organizers, and you may choose to use them, or if you don't want to use them, you don't have to, but I'm giving you the option. It usually is pretty nice to recognize these individuals at the end of the walk once you've done all your tallying. So again, reconcile everyone as an individual, fill out the location report, and then for teams, just make sure that this is filled out as an extra step. And what I usually do is for team registration area, for each teller, I'll make them responsible for X amount of teams. So if I have 6 teams and I've got 3 tellers, I'll make them responsible for 2 teams each, so that if you're part of Team Abracadabra, you'll always go to the same teller so that they can track, because they'll have the team sheet, track everyone coming in. So I do have somebody on chat saying, just to clarify, if a walker does not bring in their online form and they state they have more money than appears on the location report, we take their word on the higher amount. Yes, always take the word of the walker for the higher amount, because that number will always be changing, and we can move forward and just go with that. And then Edith also asked regarding teams, captain may have signed waiver, but others on list will need to as well. Is that correct? If the others have handed in pledge forms, then they don't need to sign a waiver. But if they didn't hand in a web pledge form and did not register online, then yes, they have to sign a waiver. Does that make sense, Edith? Because you don't want to make people double sign waivers. It just takes up their time. Next. What a walker receives. Oh, yes. Edith is saying yes. What about pledge form from tax info? If somebody is a donor on that sheet, they still have to sign a waiver, because as a donor, you haven't signed the pledge form yourself. It's the walker who signed the pledge form. So they do have to sign the waiver if they are a donor on that sheet. Does that help you, Edith? Okay, so while Edith is typing, I'm just going to move on to the next page. What a walker receives. So remember, a walker receives a t-shirt regardless of how much they have fundraised. Some of the documentation shows that you need to raise a minimum of $50. We don't really follow that, and Parkinson Canada knows that, because some of our fundraisers just can't reach that amount, but yet they have done the best they can, so we want to give them a t-shirt. Oh, she has another question. What about pledge form re-tax information? Every pledge form should have all the donation information on there. Edith, perhaps you can give me a call later and ask that question. I'm not quite sure what your question is. So the next thing is friends and family who do not fundraise at all but want to support their friends and want a t-shirt, please ask them to let the people who have fundraised first get a t-shirt, and then at the end they are more than welcome to grab a shirt if there's any left over. It's just important that the fundraisers get their shirts first. Again, I'm just talking about the walkers who receive the superstar hats, red and blue at the different levels. Anything else you want to give out, like t-shirt tickets, because I give them a t-shirt ticket to pick up a t-shirt at the table. If you have raffle prizes, anything else you need to give them out at that point. And at the end, always recognize the superstars, your top fundraisers in some way. In Vancouver, we, from the stage during the ending remarks, we call out all the superstars and we ask them to gather by the stage for a group shot, and same for the top team. Ballot draws, all the draws will be done at the end of November, and then we'll be posting them online, and I will be calling people directly if they are a winner, and the Roots incentive cards will be sent out in November as well. Banking. So this is the second level of checks. So people have gone through the registration process. It's been put in the Ziploc bags. It then goes to the second layer of people who will check the monies, and this is very similar to what the front end registration people need. Cash box. It doesn't have to be those fancy metal ones. I went to the dollar store and bought those plastic pencil boxes to use. Calculators, pens, staplers, 2 bins. I like to keep my discrepancies separate so that I can look at them afterwards, as well as and then when you mail them in to me, if there is a discrepancy that you can't figure out, keep it separate as well, so then I can have a note to double check it as well. And then I also have another bin just for the reconciled. Blank.
So Betty, these are supplies that our societies provide, our groups?
Yeah, your groups should have this year over year. A lot of people have kept these. In my last email, I think I sent out a list of things that to say, hey, if you get a chance to check your inventory and what you have left over last year. And if you don't have the extra items, purchase them, keep the receipt, and we'll reimburse you after the walk when you send in all your receipts.
Okay, thank you.
Then there's the other sheets. Blank sheets are just great for adding, subtracting, if you have to take a note somewhere. I have the blank superstar tracking sheets, team sheets, and a sheet for you to figure out what your grand total is. And those I'll show you in the next few slides. The responsibility of the banker is double check what's all the pledge forms with what's come through in terms of cash. Prepare the deposit slip. We're going to be sending you a deposit slip that has triplicates on it. So we don't want you to mail us cash at all, because that has a way of disappearing in the mail. So after the walk, you'll have a whole bunch of cash and a whole bunch of checks. Do not deposit the checks. Send those in to me and I will deposit them, and that helps me with reconciliation as well. But the cash, count it up, fill out the deposit slip, and deposit it at a RBC bank. It's in triplicate, so one goes with the deposit when you're depositing it, one you can keep for yourself, and one goes for sure back to us, so we know how much you deposited, and that's counted as the amount of cash that your walk raised. Otherwise, it's hard for us to know how much was the cash, because when we look on our deposit slips from our bank, it just says transit numbers. It doesn't tell you which location it came from. Then you fill out the banking section of the data ticket like I showed you, and then you separate any discrepancies so that we can look at them later. Compile the superstar list, compile the team list, and then you can figure out as well what you raised on walk day. And here again is just the area that the banking people will fill out. If there's a discrepancy, yes. And then once the banker has looked at it, they initial it. The front tellers initial this part. This is what the superstar tracking sheet will look like. As you come across the superstars who've raised $1,000 or more in combination, online and what they hand in on walk day, write their first name, last name, and how much they've raised. And then you could just highlight the highest, the top fundraiser, and that's the person you announce. Again, for teams, I just want to talk about the steps for banking. Treat them as an individual first. Make sure everything is okay. If there's a discrepancy, yes. If there is none, no. Bring it along forward. And then that's when you can double check that everyone who's an individual team member is listed on your team sheet. and just double check the math here that is correct, and you will find a team total here. Next step, once you find all the team totals, you write down all the team names here, what they've raised, highlight the one that is the highest fundraiser, and you can hand this sheet over to your organizer to announce at the end. Then the final steps for banking are just, again, complete the forms, and then you can also find out what the top team, what the total raised for your walk is by adding this grand total column for everyone, and then you'll get a team, your walk total for the walk day. And that would also include the people who showed up on the day and you had to handwrite in. Does that make sense? So even if you have like 6 tellers, gather all 6 tellers' registration sheets, do a master, amalgamate them into one master sheet, and you'll find out the total. Next, how-to videos. I'm not going to show them to you. I have done at least 15 scenarios on how to register somebody, and it's literally role-playing. You'll see it's my voice, and you'll see I'll be the teller, and there's somebody else who's handing in stuff. And like Edith is saying on the chat, it's a very useful tool to use for training for your registration people as well. Have a look at them. There's at least 9 vignettes that I've done addressing different situations. And in our first webinar this morning, I tried to show them on my screen, but there was a really bad time lag between the audio and the actual visual that I'm not going to do it this time. So I will be sending this presentation out with this link by the end of the week, once I've edited slightly the webinar to make sure it's flows easily. Then you'll have access to this with the link, as well as on the SuperWalk Organizer resource page, which many of you have had. There's also a link there to view it all. For your training purposes, this is not a private view. It's right on YouTube. Share that with all your registration tellers, and it is a very useful tool. It covers a lot of different scenarios. And like riding a bicycle, it doesn't happen by magic. Registration is quite complicated, and it can be stressful because you've got people waiting, they've got questions. There's a lot of steps. So it's a good idea to encourage yourselves and registration to watch these videos several times, because then it's just by practice, right? And you guys can do role playing too with your during your registration training to help with that. So have a look. I'm not going to play it, unfortunately, because again, just with the time lag, and my computer doesn't seem to want to show you what's on my other screen. So
Betty, you said you're going to send out this PowerPoint presentation electronically?
Yes, and it's going to be the whole webinar with audio too.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So I'm going to send that out as a separate email, and it's also going to be posted on our SuperWalk Organizer page in case you lose, because emails kind of get lost sometimes. You receive the email and somehow got deleted. And also for organizers, please forward these links to your registration volunteers as well. And that's it. Thank you for your time. Is there any questions?
No, very thorough. Thank you, Betty.
Okay, so here's the other thing too. It's going to take some time. There's a lot of information that I gave you on this webinar. Once you've had a chance to review this webinar again and watch through the videos, please feel free to reach out to me. The reason why I'm doing this webinar early is it gives us 3 weeks to go over any questions people have. It gives you time to train your registration people. If there's a question that one of your registration people have that you can't answer, give them my number and email, and I will help them through it as well. Does that sound good? Okay, so again, Even if you don't have questions now, feel free, as questions pop up, just to reach out to me by email or telephone. And to your registration volunteers as well.